And War Eagle. I'm Susan Hubbard, and I'm the Dean of the College of Human Sciences. And on behalf of the Women's Philanthropy Board, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first ever world's largest virtual tailgate. Let me first give a big thank you to the Auburn University cheerleaders and marching band for taking time to share some of their Auburn spirit with us. In this time of dramatic change, we wanted to provide you with something familiar and fun and full of Auburn spirit. And we can think of nothing more that recalls Auburn spirit more than tailgating. So Auburn football season is the highlight of the year for so many of the Auburn family, including me. And if you're like me, you're missing the camaraderie and the atmosphere that can only be found on the plains on a football Saturday. We hope to provide you all with a little taste of that familiar feeling this evening. This year has brought more challenges than any that we could have ever dreamed of. But Auburn, the College of Human Sciences, and the Carey Center's Women's Philanthropy Board have made wonderful accomplishments despite, or maybe even because of, these challenges. As you may know, Auburn University transitioned to remote learning and remote operations on a very short notice this past spring in response to COVID-19. In CHS, that meant navigating a multitude of new rules and regulations, bringing students safely back from abroad, and asking all of our faculty members to teach their classes and labs in a way they never had before. I'm happy to share we completed successful spring and summer terms following new safety guidelines for instruction. I'm also pleased to share that we welcomed 249 new first-year students fall semester, resulting in another record enrollment for the College of Human Sciences with 1,550 students with us this fall. The Women's Philanthropy Board, like the rest of the university, also had to navigate a few very new normals and determine how they could contribute to provide educational and mentoring initiatives from a distance. I've been so pleased to see that WPB has not only survived, but has thrived. They quickly pivoted into distance format and have offered 18 educational programs just since April, and have increased the number of participants at these programs by 700% over last year's numbers. That's incredible. They've also seen record growth and participation in their mentoring arm, the Student Philanthropy Board. WPB has a bright and long future ahead of it, no matter what the challenges are that we might face. It is now my pleasure to give the floor, or in this case, the screen, to WPB President Leah Dubberly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean Hubbard. And I have to say that I may be president of this organization right now, but those statistics you just shared are very impressive even to me. I take my hats off to Kim Walker and the whole crew for pulling this off. And we want to welcome everyone to the world's largest virtual tailgate ever. As Dean Hubbard said, I am Leah Dubberly, and I'm president of the Women's Philanthropy Board. And when I was asked to do this several years ago by Dean Hinton at the time, I never would have dreamed that this would be something that we would be doing on a Monday night in October, but here we are. I'm so thankful to be here. The Women's Philanthropy Board is the flagship division, for those of you who don't know, of the Carey Center for the Advancement of Philanthropy and Nonprofit Studies, which is an academic center in the College of Human Sciences that focuses on teaching money management, philanthropic engagement, nonprofit leadership, and also promoting the Auburn family. The cornerstone of our mission is to empower individuals to make a difference and to be educated, confident, financial decision makers and donors. WPB provides educational programs that encourage financial sustainability, philanthropic engagement, and nonprofit leadership. Since its inception in 2002, the Women's Philanthropy Board has produced 130 educational programs featuring more than 245 professionals in the fields of wealth management, philanthropy, and nonprofit leadership. We are so pleased to be able to provide $25,000 in scholarships to students in each of the College of Human Sciences academic disciplines and $25,000 in grants to a total of 6 programmatic projects within the college. This year's $50,000 funding of scholarships and grants brings our total cumulative giving to $821,000 to the College of Human Sciences over the last 18 years. And we're very, very proud of that. I've been involved since 2008. These philanthropic gifts are made possible by the generosity of our 225 individual members and our 25 corporate and business partner sponsors. We are especially grateful to our corporate partners who include Alabama Power, the East Alabama Medical Center Foundation, the Hotel at Auburn University and Dixon Conference Center, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama, Chambliss King Architects, the Flower Store, Auburn University Outreach, UBS, and favorite CPAs and advisors. In addition to these sustaining memberships, sponsorships for individual programs are also available. So if you're listening and you want to step up, we sure would love to have you. Please join me in thanking also Babs Anderson and Warren Averett for providing her Hall of Fame and All-American Tailgate sponsorships that help make this program possible today. To all of our generous donors, thank you all so much for your membership and support. And our membership opportunities and programmatic review. So just pull that up. I believe it's been placed. Also, we're so happy to have you all join us today for this virtual tailgating event. I really enjoyed the band and the cheerleaders. And some of you know that occasionally I cheer for that other team, although I'm a Sanford graduate. I will say it this one time, War Eagle, and welcome to the virtual tailgating event. Thank you so much, Dean Hubbard. Take it away.
Thank you, Leah. And thank you for your service as president of the Women's Philanthropy Board. For this virtual tailgating event, we are thrilled to feature the voice of the Auburn Tigers, Andy Burcham, and his wife, educator and philanthropist, Dr. Jan Burcham. If you have attended any of our past in-person events, you might remember that our WPB president normally provides the introduction of our fall speakers. But just like this year has not been normal in just about every way, this is also not a normal WPB event. And because of that, this is not going to be the normal introduction where a list of their accomplishments are read, although we do call your attention to the bios in the program that you received by email. You see, tonight, I have the honor of introducing them, because when you have known the speakers individually longer than they've known each other like I do, you might have a few stories to tell. I first met Andy Burcham when he arrived in Auburn over 30 years ago. In September of 1988, Andy, with that smooth radio voice, rolled into town at halftime of the second football game of the year. The Tigers were in the middle of dismantling Kansas, ultimately winning 56-7. It was a night he would never forget, mainly because he got caught in the traffic caused by fans that were leaving Jordan-Hare Stadium early. Andy must have brought some good luck with him, because those Tigers ended up going 10-2 that year. Of course, the Tigers also had Reggie Slack and Lawyer Tillman and Stacey Danley, so maybe they didn't need much luck. But Andy's plan at the time was to spend no more than 2 years on the plains. In the field of radio and TV, you put in your time in small markets and then move to larger markets as soon as possible. But Auburn had another plan for Andy, and luckily for Auburn, Andy embraced it. Those 2 years planned for life on the plains turned into 32. As we all know, there's something about Auburn that pulls you in and you are fine never letting go. It was luck or fate, I suppose, that landed Andy to work at the Auburn Network with my husband. The last 31 of Andy's Auburn years were spent as the voice of the women's basketball program, and 25 were spent in the booth at Plainsman Park calling baseball games with his dear friend, Rod Bramlett. Andy was officially offered the position of the voice of the Auburn Tigers in August of 2019. It is the kind of job he has wanted his whole life, but he understands the shoes that he stepped into. Andy and Rod Bramlett were best friends and spent more than 20 years working and traveling for work together. Andy will share a little bit with us today about that journey and that deep friendship that has manifested itself over the last year and a half. Andy met Jan in 2003, actually over a Christian dating website. It's evidence, along with this event today, that the internet can bring us good things. Although I've known Andy for a very long time, I've known his dear wife, Jan, even longer. Jan and I are from the same small town, Opp, Alabama. For those of you that aren't familiar with South and the geography of the South, Opp is located just a hop, skip, and jump from Andalusia, Elba, and Florella. Its population has served around, I guess, 6,500 people for the last 30 years. In a town that small, you know everybody, and everybody knows you. And that's certainly been the case with Jan's family and my family. Jan is one of those girls that everybody looked up to. Smart, talented. She sang, oh my goodness, her voice is amazing. Hardworking and kind. And Jan left Opp and came to Auburn for her undergraduate work. I followed a couple of years later. And several years down the road, when Jan and Andy began dating, I was so excited. I felt that it would be a beautiful, wonderful relationship, but also selfishly, I wanted their relationship to last because I needed a friend I could talk to when we were on the road with all those sporting events. So Jan and I are both from small towns, and we spent our careers in higher education. And I'm so proud of Jan and everything she's accomplished in her career. She currently holds the Fletcher Distinguished Chair in Teacher Education and is a professor of early childhood education and serves as the Associate Dean for Education in the College of Education and Health Professions at Columbus State University. Jan and Andy are two of the finest people you could ever hope to know. They are accomplished professionals with impressive titles, but perhaps their newest title of surrogate parents is the one that's the most important of all. Thank you for joining us tonight as we learn more about their lives and loves, their wins and losses on the road with the Tigers and at home away from the broadcast booth. Please help me in joining to the show this evening and welcoming our dear friends, Andy and Jan Burcham.
Thank you, Susan. War Eagle, it's a pleasure and a thrill to be with you tonight. As Susan mentioned, Jan and I both have an Auburn story separate and an Auburn story together, and we'll delve into that a little bit here tonight. As Susan mentioned, I moved to town at halftime of the Auburn-Kansas football game in 1988. I was listening to Jim Fife and Charlie Trotman call that game, and I didn't go to my first football game, Auburn football game, until the next Saturday when Auburn played host to Tennessee. I had never seen a spectacle, a football Saturday like that one, and it would become the first of many for me. And in various roles, as Susan mentioned, in 1990, I joined the Auburn Network crew as the locker room host, working with Jim and Charlie and Paul. Quentin joined our group a little bit later, and that group stayed together for quite some time. Got a chance to do some TV work on pay-per-view and tape delay TV. In the meantime, I was the women's basketball radio voice and held that title for 31 years. And in 1995, I joined Rod Bramblett in the booth for Auburn baseball. And he and I traveled together for a quarter century and dearly loved and love Auburn baseball, its coaches, its players, and those thrilling rides into the postseason. Rod and I spent a lot of time together. I've joked that Rod and I spent more time in a hotel room than Jan and I have spent more time in a hotel room, just because of all the time we spent on the road in the Southeastern Conference. And that's a lot of long rides together in a van or in an SUV. So you get to know someone very, very well. And Rod and I were friends before that began, but really became very, very close friends as a result. And while the games meant and still mean a great deal, it's the relationship that we formed together and the various people that shared our rides together that have become to mean the most to me. As Susan mentioned, Jan and I met in 2003. I was divorced for a year at the time. Yes, Susan, you're right. when I moved to town in 1988, I was going to be here for 2 years. And well, that now this is my home. I've lived longer in Lee County, Alabama than anywhere else. But Jan and I met in 2003. A Christian Singles Network was the website. I'm not even sure it's around anymore. And I saw a picture. There was a picture that Jan had on her website of herself and her dog Maggie. I think it was in your office at work, right?
I don't know.
I think it was. And it was a very simple message. I said, if you'd like to talk, give me a call or give me a holler back. No worries. And that's how literally what is now over 16 years of marriage and our life together began. I dearly love being the voice of the Auburn Tigers. And I love the years that I had with women's basketball and baseball and football and the other capacities. But I really, really appreciate this work that I'm getting to do now. But as I've mentioned before, it certainly comes as a result of a tragic incident with the passing of Rod and Paula. And I know the responsibility that comes with that, not only replacing Rod, but also replacing Jim Fife, who Rod replaced back in 2003. And I get to be with you, the Football Friday luncheons, various events. On Sunday, yesterday, as a matter of fact, I was on the Sanford lawn and got to introduce the partners of the Auburn cheerleaders together. And so those are things that I've never had the opportunity to do before. This is my dream job, being able to be a voice of the Auburn Tigers. And I hope it is a job that I have for many, many years, getting to serve Auburn and getting to serve you. So in a nutshell, that is my story. That is my Auburn story. And so now I'm going to introduce my wife, Jan Gunnels Burcham, Dr. Jan Gunnels Burcham. I call her the lovely Dr. Mrs. Jan because she was a doctor before she was a Mrs. So here's Dr. Burcham.
That's usually on the radio somewhere. So you never know what you're going to hear about yourself. It's quite interesting living that life. Yes, Andy and I met online. He sent me that first email. And I only responded because he was from Auburn. So I just said, how are things on the plains? And in the second email he sent, he told me if I had listened to any pay-per-view games or locker room interviews, that he was the person doing the job. Well, I had been listening to him all these years because I was a fan before I fell in love with him. And so I did contact Susan and her husband, and he happened to actually work with people who literally grew up both across the street from me, down the street from me, and behind us. So I had all these folks that could vouch for him and tell me he was a good guy, and he was and has been, and I'm glad he was worth waiting for. I'll say that. So that's been a good thing. I did start my Auburn journey before I met Andy. I grew up in a mixed marriage family. My dad and my sister are Alabama grads, and my mom and I are Auburn grads. And so we kept it 50-50. Had a good time with that growing up. I grew up during the time of Shug Jordan and Bear Bryant and had great respect for both teams. I am one of those people who loves to see Alabama lose when we play them, but I'm okay with having two good football teams in this state. I think there's room for that. So I grew up also, as my family only has girls. So my dad only had two daughters and loved football. So he taught us to love it as well. And so I do dearly love sports and grew up a fan. Grew up coming to Auburn. I've been sitting in the same seats my mother had for years and years. I don't know how many decades. But that's a lot of fun. And that's something I'm missing. I don't know about the rest of you, but I sit in section 11. I miss my section 11 people. And I wish that we could have some time together, hopefully sooner rather than later. But it's been a good time. I came to Auburn initially because I wanted to be an Auburn Singers. And I was. Enjoyed being in concert choir and Auburn Singers and working with Dr. Tom Smith, and still am so thankful to see him from time to time around town as well. Those days were fun. I had so many fabulous experiences traveling internationally as well as across this country, just as a part of Auburn and representing Auburn through that singing group. So it was really a tremendous opportunity. I majored in education, and so I started working. I taught in Birmingham, in Mountain Brook, and then I taught in Eufaula, which I dearly loved my time there. It happened to be a time when a lot of single women came to work in the same school system, so we had a great time. And about the time that they were starting to work on their master's, I already had my master's from the University of Alabama, Birmingham. I decided I wanted to go back to school, and I started looking at doctoral programs, and Auburn was the place that gave me what I was looking for. I looked nationally to see where I wanted to go, and back to Auburn I went. I had the great privilege of working with Dr. Janet Taylor. I was her graduate assistant for a couple of years and learned so much, and then went to work at Troy State in Dothan until I met this guy. And then once that happened, I was really excited to come back to Auburn again. So I've lived in Auburn in 3 different periods of my life, and it's amazing how it's changing, but it still is all about the people and the relationships. And as much as you hear people arguing about the change, I think it's still Auburn. People still want to come here. They still want to stay here once they do come here. And I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this. One of the things that has been great about Andy and I being together is my love of sports. I was able to travel a good bit. I travel to as many away games as I can, typically at least one a season. Of course, this year is different. But I really enjoy traveling with and getting to know the radio crew and getting to know the coaches and some of the players. And I am a big fan. I'm a fan first. And so I love that aspect of our lives together. And getting to know Rod and Paula was wonderful as well, because Andy's right. He spent so much time with Rod, and they would be on the road. We made fun about them spooning each other and all kinds of stuff.
Not really.
But it's Paula and I would have a good time laughing about them while they were away. And often I would get a call from Paula, typically on a Friday night, and she would say something to the effect that she had been ditched by one or both of her kids for their friends, and that I want to go to dinner, and we would take off and go have dinner together. And that was awesome, being able to have that kind of relationship. So when one of us was left behind, there was somebody else experiencing the same thing. So we did get close. And at the time, they were living just down the street from us too. So that was really an exciting friendship. You want to pick up?
Yes, I will. Thank you. I apologize for I keep moving away from the camera, and I think I'm disappearing on you. I apologize for that. If that could be a part of weight control, I'd dearly love that. But well, that's a topic for another day. I thought I would give you a little bit of a glimpse behind what it is like just a week of a game now. I was looking at the pictures before we came on tonight of all the great tailgates that are going on. And that's something I've never been I've never been to a tailgate at Auburn because I've always been working. Now, I'm not asking for sympathy there. That's exactly what I want to do, but they look so much fun. And we haven't had supper yet. And the one that had the wings and the fruit salad looked absolutely delicious. So I, whoever's tailgate that was, thumbs up for that. And a lot of these are things, if you ever heard Rod talk about his week, of prep for a football game. Mine is very, very similar. Monday is a really busy day to start prepping for the next opponent. Great that Auburn beat Ole Miss this past weekend. That was a thrilling finish in Oxford, a much needed win for the program, to be sure. But you got to move on. You got to put it behind you. And Auburn is now getting ready for an LSU team that is much improved, to be sure. So today was a big day for me to start working on what we call our spotting boards. I don't know if I don't know if you can see this or not. I'll tell you what, let's turn off the background here. I think that might help a little bit. And you can see this a little bit more. None. There we go. All right. Our house is clean, I think. So here we go. This is a spotting board. These are things that I have with me for every game. Try and get this close so you can maybe see a little bit. It is basically a 2 or 3 deep for every position, both offense and defense for both teams. So this is the Auburn defense. So Auburn is up here and the Ole Miss offense is down at the bottom. And then you just flip it over and you have just the opposite. But I use a computer program to do this. And Monday's a very, very important day. I get the notes from both schools and that type of thing to put in statistics or trends and that type of thing that I will try to use during our broadcast each week. And Monday's a really heavy day for that. Tuesday, if I don't have them done, I'll try and tweak them. I want to have them done by Wednesday, typically. And then I will take Thursday and I will start the names and numbers of the next opponent. I always want to try and be a little bit ahead. In November, it becomes even more important just because basketball will be starting. And instead of just a football game on a Friday, it could be a basketball game on a Tuesday and or a Wednesday, or a game on a Sunday in addition to that football game. So I'm always trying to keep up with each season there. Our crew is a terrific crew of folks, and I've worked with many of these men and women for a long, long time. Patrick Tisdale is our engineer. Patrick is one of those folks that, like Susan and Jan, is from Opp, Alabama, and Patrick grew up literally just up the street from Jan. Patrick's father, Joe, was one of those inspirations musically for Susan and Jan and thousands of Opp students, and just a terrific man. And Patrick is our engineer. Paul Ellen has been with Auburn in 2 stints. This is the longest. Paul and I came aboard the Auburn Network together in 1990. And Paul has been our studio man. Now he is with us in the booth for the most part since that time. But Paul, you may remember, was the play-by-play voice for Auburn before Jim Fife for a couple of years when Coach Barfield was at Auburn. And then the rights changed and Jim took over the first year that Coach Dye was at Auburn. And in the meantime, Paul went on and did some work for Southern Miss. He has worked in NASCAR. He is a public relations guy by trade, and he's an incredibly talented man. He is really the Swiss Army knife of our crew because Paul can do any job that we need, especially on air, and has done that as well. Of course, you know our former players that are on the crew. Stan White, who is a State Farm agent by trade, is in his 20th season as the color commentator for Auburn football, and then just continues to get better and better. Ronnie Brown is now in his 3rd or 4th season as our sideline reporter after a fabulous Auburn career and a terrific career in the NFL. And Jason Campbell joins us as an analyst for the home games and various events as well. Of course, he and Ronnie both were part of that 2004 undefeated team. We've got 3 members of our crew that all played at Auburn, all played on undefeated teams in their senior year, and none of them had a chance to play for a national championship. Stan White was a senior in 1993. That team, of course, was on probation. And Ronnie and Jason were on a team, and it's just a shame in '04 that they didn't get a chance to play for a national championship, because I truly believe they were the best team in the country that season. But we're thrilled to have them with us. Brad Law is my partner on Tiger Talk. He is our producer. And Brad and I, when baseball returns, will team up for baseball this coming season. And so those are the folks that you get to hear and that I get to work with on game day. There's a lot of work that goes in through the week. We dearly love our time together on these broadcasts. And Friday night meals are very, very important, as you might guess. There's a great responsibility in who gets to pick where we go for dinner on Friday night. You won't be surprised that I get to say typically where we're going on a Friday night, but those times together are a lot of fun, and we will have a good meal together. So that's kind of what my week looks like. Jan and I talk a lot of football. We talk a lot of sports together, but we've never sat together at an Auburn event, have we?
No.
Every once in a while, Jan will sneak up and sit next to me at a ball game. You saw a picture. There was a picture of Jan. She sat next to Sonny and I last year when Auburn played St. Louis University in Birmingham. So Jan got producer credits on that broadcast that day. But that's kind of what our Saturdays during football season are like. If we're a regular year and Jan were sitting at her season tickets, the crew gathers in the morning or early afternoon at Auburn Arena, and we have a meal together. And then we walk across the campus to the other side, the east side of the stadium, and get ready for the Tiger Tailgate show, which typically is right next to the Student Center and across from the Bo and Cam and Pat Sullivan statues. But this year, with everything changing, we're indoors for both home and away.
Just to let you know, he's always said he will not sit with me at a game. I think he's afraid he will be embarrassed because I do cheer.
One of the things that Jan has learned about me is I am never, ever, ever late. It drives me crazy. I mean, absolutely crazy to be late. And as a result, I'm hyper early to broadcasts. If it's like this coming Saturday, we go on the air at 11:30. There really is no other function until 11:30. But if I'm not at the stadium by 9:30 that morning, Jan will tell you that I'm getting nervous at that point. And it's the same way, Joanne, for Auburn basketball. I'm there 2 hours before the broadcast or more. We typically, Rod and I, would get to baseball games before the other team's personnel were there. Sometimes we had to wait for them to open the door so we could get in the press box. And that's one of the things that Rod and I shared together. Rod was a very dear friend of mine. He and I were very different in many, many ways. He was younger than me, really came up in he was a child of the 80s. I was a child of the 70s. Our musical tastes were very different, but our love of Auburn was very, very much the same. And love of family and the Auburn family was very, very much the same. I traveled around the country, and you hear about various fan bases around the country, but I can tell you with certainty that there's nothing like the Auburn family. You hear about the whatever school, fill in the blank school nation and their fans, but as Coach Dye once said, Auburn fans root for Auburn because of Auburn. There are other schools that root for whatever school because of their football team. And I truly believe that about Auburn. So you want to just talk a little bit about what our life is like now, how it has changed for the last year and a half?
Well, as you all know, May 25th last year occurred. And Rod and Paula asked us on one of those Friday night outings to dinner where we rarely talked sports. But they asked us one of those nights earlier in the fall if we would be willing to be guardians to their children should anything happen to them. And we even kind of joked about it at the time because, that's something people ask and it's never going to occur. And we did ask them to give us some time to think about it, just to be respectful and make sure that we were right. But we knew we were going to do it, that we would say yes, and didn't think anything else about it because that was in the fall. And then earlier that May, just a couple of weeks before the accident occurred, Andy got an email from Rod asking for our full names. And he was like, okay, here they are. Why? It's just kind of an odd thing to get a request from somebody. And he said that they were getting ready to redo their wills and name us as guardians. And so they needed all of that information for the legal work. And as a result of that request, Andy and Rod talked at length about the fact that we would become guardians if anything happened to them. And then never expecting a couple of weeks later for that to actually happen. I think it's a day that neither of us will ever forget. In a way, every second of that day, almost from the time Andy got the first call about the accident occurring, is ingrained in my memory. And we had no idea what to do, where we were going. I'm so very thankful for all of the people who have been there, all fabulous Auburn people who have been there to help guide us as we've gone through. Andy and I had never been parents other than to the four-legged kind. I did have a degree in education. Thankfully, it has come in handy at times. But we knew at that moment that our lives were, not only were this family's lives changing in ways that we could not even begin to fathom, but ours were too. And, people have been so kind and generous and thank us for what we've done. We just did what we promised our friends we'd do. It really wasn't even a choice. You do what you have to do, and that's what we've done. We have never tried to replace Rod and Paula. We can't, we don't want to, with their children. And we talk about them a lot. We kid with their kids, and anytime we think of them, we bring it up and talk about them. And I think that's helpful. We can laugh about them. We can tell good stories, all those kinds of things. But now Joshua lives with us. We are his legal guardians. He has just turned 17. He was 15 when he came to be with us. So we've seen him through 16 and learning to drive and getting a car. And he's now a junior. Those of you who have lived through junior year academically know it's a challenge. So that's been interesting. But Josh is a great student. And he is very independent, very self-directed. And Shelby is also doing well. Shelby's in her senior year. She will be learning very soon, we hope, where she is doing her student teaching in the spring. She'll be student teaching in one of the elementary schools in the area. And so we're really excited for her. We actually just purchased her class ring for her as a gift from us, and she'll be getting that in a couple of weeks at the ring ceremony. So those exciting things are happening, and those kids are doing remarkably well. In large part, I think because of Rod and Paula's love of Auburn and Auburn's embracing of all of us. It has just been amazing how the Auburn family has wrapped their arms around these kids and been there and just been so kind and caring. I know for Shelby, she didn't initially want to go to Auburn, and Josh doesn't, but we're trying to work on that. I can understand. They grew up here. They want to go away. They want to, spread their wings. But after all this occurred, Shelby's view of Auburn and what Auburn family really means has grown and changed in such a positive way. And she knows, she recognizes what a gift that has been for all of us. And I can't thank everyone enough. It's impossible to do so. But please know that we do appreciate everything all of you and all of the Auburn family have done for the kids, for us. But our lives are different now. We did our first, last year, we did our first meet the teacher night at the high school. I've done meet the teacher night, but I was the teacher. So it's just a complete different experience. And I was an early childhood teacher, taught kindergarten, which I still dearly love. And high school's a different animal. But it's a good thing. We've learned about teenagers and their sometimes interesting attitudes and all of those kinds of things. But you know, we've all settled into a good routine, I think. I don't know if it'll ever be normal, but it is. We went through all of this, got through about a year, and then COVID hit. So it's just been a crazy time in everyone's lives, but we're all making it work. Joshua does not enjoy sports. But he does have a lot of things that he does. And so he works at a local coffee shop a couple of nights a week. And he loves to go to thrift stores, and he's very creative, does a lot of writing, those kinds of things. Shelby does love sports. So she's the one that I'll trade War Eagles with during the games and those sorts of things, along with my mom, of course. But it's an adventure. It's been an interesting time, something we never thought we would be doing. But we've been blessed by it tremendously. Sometimes I go through times and I just want to scream at Rod and Paula for making us follow through. But at the same time, you know, I mean, they left us their most precious possessions. And so we're doing the best we can to honor them and continue to make sure these kids grow up and have a fabulous life ahead of them.
Very good. Let me say this before we take a couple questions, and we've got a couple questions in the chat. If you have one and would like to ask it in the chat, please feel free to do so. I've known about the Women's Philanthropy Board for a long time because Sid James used to be on my show every year. We were talking about the lunches and all the things that y'all do. And I was always so impressed with Sid, one, and I'd known Sid for a long time, but never in this capacity because she was a terrific guest. I always look forward to our visits together, but just all of the things that you have done and continue to do with the Women's Philanthropy Board. So please know how important what you do is through the year in Auburn and certainly beyond Auburn. So good to see you.
You have a question that asks, what is your most memorable call so far? Well,
if it's since last year and since I was named the voice, I mean, that first game was pretty memorable. The win against Oregon and the last second throw between Bo Nix and Seth Williams. And by the way, we got to see that again this past week, didn't we, at Ole Miss. I've got to say, one of the most memorable calls I've ever been a part of was with Rod. And for those Auburn baseball fans out there, you go back to 1997 and the David Ross home run in that Florida State Regional down in Tallahassee on Saturday. And that game didn't win the regional for Auburn, but it put Auburn in the winner's bracket where Auburn had to lose twice. And Auburn didn't. Auburn won that second game and went to the World Series. And I remember after Rod and I stopped jumping around together and hugging each other, and, you know, we lost it on the broadcast that day. I remember saying to Rod, I said, Rod, folks are going to remember this call forever. That's how important this call is. And Billy Hitchcock, Mr. Billy Hitchcock, confirmed that later when he was talking with Coach Baird, and he said this is one of the most important moments, not in just Auburn baseball history, but Auburn athletics history. And it's still one of those calls that folks ask me about today. And I'm thrilled that I got to be just a little part of that with Rod. Last year's Iron Bowl 48-45 win against Alabama was a really memorable day and night for me. And my brother, Matt, and his wife, Sheila, came to their first ever Iron Bowl. We talked them into driving down from Illinois because we had 2 extra tickets for the game to go to the Iron Bowl. So they came down and went to that game. That was their first Iron Bowl. And Jan and those two had already driven home after that broadcast. And I remember walking from the stadium after the broadcast and after I'd done Coach Malzahn's TV show with him. And I was walking from the stadium to the parking lot at Beard Eves Coliseum. And I just remember thinking to myself, how blessed I am to be in this position, how blessed I was to be able to call that football game and call it for Auburn. It was my first Iron Bowl as Auburn's voice. And I was thrilled to do that. Here's another little insight for you that Jan had for me after South Carolina. And we all know how frustrating the South Carolina game was this year because 3 interceptions and 9 or 10 penalties. And we all know that Auburn should have won that game. And Coach Malzahn says the same thing. But I got home that night. And since it was an early game, it wasn't real late when we drove back. And at one point, Jan and I were talking about the game. And when I get home, I get grilled about different plays and strategy and this type of thing, like it was my fault.
It's my job.
It's her job. But at one point she looked at me and said, even in the disappointment of the game today, did you have a moment where you realized that you were the one calling the game? And I did. And that's a great part of the priority of it is being able to do this job and to do it to the very best of my ability, even if the game isn't going well for Auburn. So that was a great little insight from Jan that day.
There's a question for me.
Good.
Wanting to know if Shelby and I ever critique you in your calls.
Okay.
You know, I haven't talked to Shelby about Andy's calls, honestly, and I don't know if she listens. We haven't listened together, and I can only imagine that's a really, really hard thing for her. I know during the first year, when Andy was named the voice, Shelby came to the press conference, and it took such bravery on her part to do that. And it was much harder, I think, than she thought it would be. She wanted him to get it. She knew her dad would want him to get it. And so she was pleased from that standpoint. But of course, she still wishes her dad was doing that job, as we all do, truthfully. You know, so I don't know if Shelby listens. I do critique. I'll tell you what, one of my contributions each week is to edit the intro. That's the one thing that Andy scripts before he's going into a game.
It's the only thing I script.
And so he typically sends that to me to edit. And usually it's just a comma here or whatever. I mean, I have to write as part of my job, so I'm pretty good at that. But I do give him ideas for things to include there. And I knew in his first game, that game in Texas, it took him about a quarter and a half to settle in. And I asked him, I said, did you feel like it was going 90 miles an hour? Because I could tell it. I don't think the general person could, but I could. So I do listen for those kinds of things. And I will text him during a game if there's something I see, particularly if there's like a penalty or something called and we're getting a review. I'll be texting what I can see, like it's going to help. But he'll have to say whether it helps or not. But yes.
Sure. I read it sometimes if I notice it. Yeah. So there you are. Here's another question.
Who do you want to
from Sid? Okay. Who would you like to interview that you haven't already? Sid, I'll be honest, there's a couple folks that I will never get the opportunity until I'm in heaven. I would love to have been able to sat down with Coach Jordan. I never had a chance to meet him, to talk with him about those days at Auburn. And there's some other celebrities out there. There's some musicians. Billy Joel, I would love one day to sit down and talk with. I'm not sure he'll ever do that with me. But I've been able to interview a lot of people in politics and in sports and just everyday life. Some actors that I've really enjoyed getting to know just a little bit. And that's one thing, that I've always done since I was a little kid. My grandmother gave me a tape recorder when I was about 12 years old. The old cassette tape recorder that came with the microphone that had a cord to it, and I used that as a kid, and we'd be upstairs in the room that my brother and I shared, and I'd be interviewing my friends like I was Johnny Carson. So that's something that I've done for a long time. And Jan will tell you that if we go somewhere and we're in a group and I don't know someone, but I want to have a conversation with you, I will put it into interview mode, and I will talk to that person like I'm interviewing them, just to try and get to know them a little bit better. So
It comes in handy sometimes too, when you need to carry on the conversation. I'm like, go.
From Lane, what are our chances this week against LSU? From Bill and Lane, sorry. I think Auburn's chances are very good this week. Now, listen, LSU played its best game by far this past week against that South Carolina team that beat Auburn, a week and a half ago in Columbia. And LSU put it together from an offensive standpoint and shut down the South Carolina offense. I think this is going to be a really, really good game. LSU feels like it's starting to put it all together after winning a national championship last year. Auburn feels better about its team after its win against Ole Miss this past weekend. So both of these teams take some momentum into Saturday. And I know that some of you may have an opportunity to be at the game. You'll be watching. I hope you listen to us, sync that up and listen to our broadcast. I think this should be a fun game. I don't think it will be the typical defensive slugfest, though, with LSU. Both of these teams have the ability to score a lot of points. So that's what I expect. Anybody else?
I don't see
Anything else there, sweetheart?
Were you able to attend Coach Dye's funeral?
No. And one of the great things about the job that I've had is I got to spend some time with Coach Dye that typically a media person didn't. Those last 3 years that he was the coach, I did his pre and post game show together. And I'm tempted to tell the story about the very first time that I interviewed Coach. I'm going to go ahead and tell it. Jan knows the story. Please. Anyway, I was early, and this was 1990, and it was the very first game. I don't even recall who we were playing that day. And at that time, we were wearing coat and tie for games. Had an Auburn Network blazer. Proudly wore the Auburn Network blazer, and the orange and blue slanted striped tie. And they said this is what Coach Dye will do. He will come in from Tiger Walk. He will go into the coach's room. He will change his shoes into his Nike sneakers. Of course, Auburn was Nike then, at least on shoes. And he will use the restroom, and he'll come out to you, and then you guys will walk out to the field, and you'll do his pregame show together on the field. And each coach is different. Coach Tuberville liked to do it on the field. Most everybody else we take care of in their office or somewhere else. And so, boy, I'm there, and I've got this old Marantz tape recorder. It's as big as a Bible. It's huge, and I've got my microphone there, and I'm thinking about all the questions that I'm going to ask Coach Dye. And I was probably there an hour before Tiger Walk that day, just waiting there, And I think Coach Dye could sense that I was a little bit nervous, and he walked in, and before he exited to go use the restroom and to change his shoes, he just looked at me, And this is what Coach Dye said, and I'll do it in my best Coach Dye voice. He said, "You ain't going to piss down your leg, are you?" That's what Coach Dye told me that day. I think that was his way of saying, you know what? Everything's going to be okay. That kind of broke the ice that day. But I got to interview him for the next 3 years, including his last game as an Auburn coach. And then I hosted his outdoor show. If you remember, he had an outdoor show for a while, and I was basically the traffic cop. I just got him in and out of breaks. I was not there as an expert, but just to help out with the broadcast. And I got a chance to meet and be with Coach Dye as a coach and as a man. I was not at his funeral. His memorial service was very, very private. There was a couple family members there, and Coach and Craig Ogletree. Remember Craig Ogletree, who was a linebacker on those teams for the 80s? Craig Ogletree is the one that did the eulogy that day out at Coach Dye's farm. And then I think since then they've invited players from his teams through not only at Auburn but East Carolina and Wyoming as well to come in on a couple Saturdays and just get together and talk about Coach Dye as well. So I was not at his memorial service, but like all of us, he impacted our lives in many, many ways, not just as a football coach at Auburn.
There's a question asking me what I'm passionate about philanthropically. And I appreciate that question because I love that aspect of what this group does. I think it's just so important that we give back and that we help others. And I'm a fixer. I'm a helper. That's what I do. I like when I can do things to help others and make things better for people. Through my career has primarily been education focused, and I've been so very fortunate working with folks from Auburn. We traveled to China, and I did some work in Beijing there that really opened my eyes tremendously about how others view our country. And it was amazing to be able to have that experience. I've been able to go to Oxford University and present there, and as well as all across the country. And most of my work, my philanthropic work is done with schools and with education groups that are related to education. My whole career has really been about improving teaching and learning that's happening in schools. And so I'm continuing to do that now. I do work with several different schools in the Columbus and Auburn areas. And then I am able to do work across the country through my connections with my colleagues from early childhood education. And I'm very, very thankful for that. I also like to get involved deeply with mentoring. I work with mentoring a lot of women athletes, and both here and at Columbus State. And so I know enough about athletics, I guess, that sometimes I get asked to do some of those kinds of things, and it means a great deal to me. And part of my responsibility in my work, not necessarily philanthropically, but just in my work, is also mentoring new faculty members. So it's a part of who I am and what I do. And I guess I try to find avenues for that wherever that may be. So that's a little bit about my work.
You've got a couple more there too.
Regarding motherhood, what did you learn from your mom that you find yourself doing with Shelby and Josh? Oh my.
That's a good question,
It
Mary.
is a very good question. My mom, I love my mom dearly, and I was able actually a couple of weeks to go. She lives in Huntsville in an independent living, senior living area that has been on lockdown. So a couple of weeks ago, I was able to go spend some time with her for the first time since March. And it did both of us some good. I do find myself saying things and doing things and knowing when I do that it makes me look to Joshua and to Shelby really old. And I hear my mother coming out of my mouth. It's kind of scary. Something I thought I would never ever be doing, but I get it now. I truly do get it now. You don't ever relax comfortably until they're back in the house. But Joshua's really good. I mean, and we're not Shelby's guardian, so we have less influence over her, though she does come to see us and call us when she needs something, and we're there whenever she needs something or wants something. But Joshua's a great kid. And he hears me get on him when he doesn't do something he's supposed to do. You know, I've asked a bunch of times, did everybody think those dishes in the sink were going to wash themselves? You know, whatever it happens to be, he's a normal kid, and we're learning to find our way. But I do see my mother, but please don't tell her that. Susan, do not tell her that I said she was right about it, because then I won't hear the end of it. You know how that is. Andy, what's your favorite road game restaurant?
Ooh, boy, that's a great question. And it's one that I have great passion in. There's Old Hickory in Columbus, Mississippi, which is a little hole-in-the-wall steakhouse. And you walk in and the grill is in the front window. So it's great advertising. There is Ye Old Steakhouse. You're gonna hear a theme here. Ye Old Steakhouse is in Knoxville, Tennessee, and that is very well known. I mean, it's been a Friday night haunt for football fans forever. And we'll go there during basketball season, or if we're there for a baseball weekend, we always go there. I'll tell you another place that I always try to go to, and I've got family that lives in Springdale, Arkansas. And Springdale and Fayetteville are like Auburn and Opelika. They run together. And my sister is the choral director at Springdale High School. Her husband is an engineer, and they've lived there, well, longer than you and I have been married. So probably 20 years. And so when I go to Arkansas for a game, I will always go to dinner with them. And there's a pizza place in Taneytown, and Taneytown is like Lochapoka to Auburn. It's that close, but it's a small town, and it's a little Italian community there. And there's a pizza joint called Guido's that serves thin crust, crispy pizza with tons of toppings on it. And that is an absolute must for me. There's also, and this goes all the way back to Jim. Jim Fife, we always, when we went to Fayetteville, went to a place called Herman's Steakhouse. It's actually called Herman's Ribs, but it's another steakhouse. And I'm not lying, folks. You drive by it and it looks like a crack house. It looks awful. But inside, it is out. If you're ever in Fayetteville and you have a chance to go to Herman's, do yourself a favor. So there's four for you right there.
Where's Doe's Eat Place?
Doe's Eat Place is also in Fayetteville, and it's also a steak joint.
That is the place we went the first time I went on a trip with Rod and Andy. And Rod put away, I mean, Rod was a pretty skinny guy at the time. He put away the biggest steak I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was huge.
Rod loved a prime rib.
He ate every bit of it,
Oh, boy.
every bite of
Indeed.
it. They ask about favorite stadium.
Well, Jordan Hare is obviously number one, and that shouldn't come as a
Second
surprise.
favorite.
Second, let's see, where do I like to go?
I know one of the things that you said, I've not been yet, but to Texas A&M.
Yeah, the A&M experience is outstanding. I'm seeing, looks like, Joanne, you guys have been, haven't you? And the folks in College Station are really friendly. It's almost eerie how friendly they are to you. But they're very welcoming. It's a big, tall stadium, and we're on top of the stadium. We're at the very top now on the east side of the stadium. But when they saw the horns off the Longhorn and they're going back and forth like this, you can feel the stadium sway with the fans. and that can be a little weird. But the pomp and circumstance when the brigade comes in before the game and their halftime show, and I played in the band in high school, so I like the halftime shows. I don't just leave the booth. I like to watch them. And theirs is all, it is nothing like any other halftime show that you see. It's all drills and incredible maneuvers in marching. And it's all marches too. No popular music, it's all marches. And it's really fun. It's really fun. I enjoy going there for anything. And there's a really couple good restaurants down there for barbecue as well. So I enjoy that. I'll tell another stadium in football, and we don't get to go to this very often, is the stadium at Kentucky. What is now, I guess, it's Kroger Field. Used to be Commonwealth Stadium. It's a little bit smaller, and it's just a little more intimate than the other places. And it's kind of out away from everything too. You know, it's not right in the middle of campus, and it's just it's a different feel. So there you go.
Somebody asked if we would take Joshua on a tour of Alabama if he wanted to go there. Yes, of course we would. But I don't think that's on his list. Now, I will say Georgia's on his list. He's considering journalism, and Georgia has a very good journalism school, and he likes Athens. I like Athens. I love to visit there too. And I enjoy those baseball trips primarily because you're in a town long enough to be able to actually enjoy the area. Most of the others, it's in and out. But those are fun trips to make. Someone's asking about seeing the next generation of announcers.
Yeah, that's from Kim.
Do you try to mentor potential next voice of the
Sure.
Tigers?
And folks did that for me, and I try to do that as well. Brad Law, who I get to work with, is an outstanding broadcaster. And one day I wouldn't be surprised if Brad isn't in the spot that I'm in right now. Britt Bowen does women's basketball at Auburn, and for a long time followed me doing soccer, and is now doing the soccer for SEC Network Plus. Britt works he oversees Weagle now. So those are two that I think will be excellent Auburn broadcasters for many years to come. So
he often has, we have families that will contact us with kids that want to do the job that Andy's doing, just like he did when he was a kid. And Andy is so gracious to spend time with kids. They'll come by on a Saturday before a game, and he'll come down from where he is and talk with them and just encourage them to keep going. But it's I think it's who you are, but it's very much appreciated by those kids and their families. And who knows, maybe they'll end up coming to Auburn and learning more about broadcasting that way.
The industry has changed dramatically, and it's almost 40 years for me now in the broadcast. And from a technical standpoint, just the way you edit. When I was coming up, you actually had a reel-to-reel tape, and you got a razor blade and tape, and you would splice your edits together. And now we do it digitally, and it's much better now and much easier now. Of course, those tapes, and I didn't know this at the time, came from Ampex over in Opelika. Yeah. I had no idea I was going to be going to the area where those reel-to-reel tapes came from. My other favorite college towns, I really do enjoy going elsewhere. I enjoy College Station. I enjoy Oxford. If you have a chance to stay near downtown and visit the square, there's some great restaurants. There's Corner Books, which is
wonderful
historic bookstore there on the square. You can go and get autographed copies of books that
Ace Atkins.
Yeah, Ace Atkins. Well, of course, Ace has an office on the square. The former Auburn football player, that his novels on Quinn Coulson are about to be made into a series on HBO, as a matter of fact. But you can go into that bookstore. I mean, if you like good bookstores, old style books, well, it even has a soda fountain upstairs. Go to Corner Books in Oxford. So I enjoy going to a lot of them. Will you be part of sports journalism? If they ask me, I would be a part of the sports journalism program at Auburn. I think a lot of sports journalism, when folks think about that now, they think of the TV side of it. And I've done a little bit of TV work, but my heart has always been in radio. And I'm afraid sometimes that side of journalism gets left behind a little bit. But I'm always open to talking. I speak to classes just about every year, just about what I do and how I do it and that type of thing. But if they would ask me to be a part of that journalism program, I would certainly entertain that question. We've been with you for a long time tonight. We're monopolizing your time tonight, Susan.
No, we are so grateful. Jan and Andy, thank you for sharing your evening with us. This has just been fantastic, and it's been such a wonderful way to celebrate the Auburn spirit with you both. So thank you for your time. What an inspiration you have been to me and to countless others in our community and beyond. So please, if you all will join me once again in thanking Jan and Andy for sharing their story.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
I would also like to recognize our team 360 at the Carey Center, who have outdone themselves again with this program. Sid James Naqshband, Kim Walker, Mary Elizabeth Thukai, Lauren Faulkner, Brittany Branyan, Greg Dupke, and Lynn Strong. Thank you, everyone, for joining for the Women's Philanthropy Board's world's largest virtual tailgate. We do thank you for all that you do for the Women's Philanthropy Board and for the College of Human Sciences. And we hope to see you again at our future programs. War Eagle, and good night.